And we will share this. All you have to do is click that button, or click this button right here. And switch.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Everyone can still hear. Nobody's saying no. That's a good sign.
I think they're muted.
Yeah, they're muted. So, all right. So just stand here. You're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. And of course, I have to say hello to my son and my grandchildren. Hello, Edward, Eleanor, and Nicholas. I'm going to speak on wildflowers tonight, and they are not necessarily always the little small ones we see in the spring. I have stuck a couple of shrub flowers and tree flowers in also. My sources I have listed on the screen: the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, wildflower.org, Wildflowers of Texas by Gayata Azilske, and Wildflowers of Texas by Michael Eason. The interesting thing is, many times my sources did not agree. And another thing, some of the names of the wildflowers have been changed in recent years. So we have one book that was published after another book, one with a new name, one with the old name. I may not have gotten all these identifications right. The genus is right, the species may not be. And if there's a subspecies, then I definitely don't have it. I was kind of hoping that I would have Liz and Nancy and some of the wildflower people, so when I said something, they would be able to help. I have added a few interesting and odd things that I found because I thought that made it more interesting. Well, there. Sorry, it's not my computer. The first flower is the windflower, the anemone, and it's a perennial. It has no petals. Those are sepals, and the sepals are colored. We have white, blue, purple, violet, and it does bloom from February through April and then goes dormant in the summer. Do not eat it. All parts are poisonous. The angel trumpet is in the 4 o'clock family. I finally saw one this last year, and I thought that was really, really exciting. It blooms March through November and likes sun, and it likes dry alkaline soils, limestone soils. The Asclepias tuberosa is the butterfly weed, and most of what you see in the nursery is Asclepias curasivica. The tuberosa is, well, its other name is chiggerweed, but I swear I've never heard it called that. The way to tell if you have the tuberosa rather than the curasivica is when you put your thumbnail into a leaf, it is not a milky sap. It's watery juice. Also, the leaves are alternate. It blooms April through September. Mine in the backyard is blooming right now and looks great. This is one of our local milkweed, the zyzode, and we find it along the side of the road a lot. And it grows there in spite of the fact that the roads department mows. It has shallow roots, but it manages to survive drought and mowing, and blooms and sets seed. It's also called the Lindheimer milkweed. What I thought was interesting is that the indigenous people of the area used the zyzode to make a poultice for skin rashes. The Asclepias texana is a new milkweed in the Park West pollinator garden. It's the Texas milkweed, and we just planted it this year. We have one in bloom if you want to go out to see it. It blooms through September. It is deciduous. It has these beautiful white flowers, low water use, sun, and it is of special value to native bees. It seems to spread fairly easily because from the one we planted, we now have several others in the garden. I don't have any luck with the columbine. The city planted columbine when they did Walnut Creek Park, and they're gone too. It is a perennial, blooms April through September. I am assuming this is chrysanthemum. The legissima is a paler yellow. It's a shade-loving perennial. Mine was in the shade and died, and the ones at the park were in the shade and died, so I don't know what it likes. Its name, columbine, the word columbinus is Latin for dove, and aquila is Latin for eagle, and your petals resemble eagle talons. So we have an eagle-taloned dove. Baby blue eyes is very likely my favorite plant in the entire world. It's also called flannel breeches, and every early spring, March through May, it shows up back by my dry creek bed, and it's just everywhere. It's dead by the summer, but it seems to set seed, and it just gives me a lot of pleasure. It grows 6 to 8 inches high. It's shady back by my dry creek bed, and it is of special value to native bees. The black-eyed Susan, the rudbeckia, is one of our larval hosts for butterflies. The Gorgon checker spot and the border patch, both like the black-eyed Susan. It starts blooming in April and it continues to frost. It is drought tolerant, and you can, if you are a spinner, weaver, do anything with fiber, you can get green and yellow dye from the rudbeckia. Blue-eyed grass is that blue purpley color, and the interesting thing about it, it's not grass. It is a member of the iris family. It likes dry soils, moist soils, sandy soil. It grows in the sun, the part shade, the shade. It's a lovely little plant, and it refuses to let me transplant it. It grows all along the edge of my neighbor's lawn. And with permission now, I went and tried to dig some up, and it would not transplant. So there's obviously a secret, but I don't know what it is. The bluebonnet is the state flower of Texas. All 6 species of bluebonnet are the state flower of Texas. It's also called the Texas lupin, buffalo clover, and the wolf flower. I've never heard it called that, however. This is probably Texensis. And I say that because it's the easiest to grow from seed, and you can buy it as transplants in the nursery. And the leaves have 5 to 6 leaflets. And I actually, well, Tom caught me. I went out to the pollinator garden this morning, and our crazy bluebonnets are all up and blooming. And I counted leaves, and most of them had 5 leaflets. A couple of them had 6 leaflets, and 1 or 2 had 7 leaflets. And that's about right for the Texensis. Your perennials are Platensis and perennis, and one grows from Nebraska to Texas in sandy soils with 2-foot bloom spikes, and the perennis is a perennial to East Texas, and what we have at the park is not perennial. The original bluebonnet for the state flower was the Concinus, and it was a small West Texas native, and I think they wanted something a little more showy. And your last species is the Havardii, which is a Big Bend native. As usual, as with many plants in Texas, if you eat the seeds, it's toxic. The bluebonnet is a larval host to the hairstreak and the elfin butterflies, and it's especially valuable to native and bumblebees. The large buttercup grows 1 to 3 feet tall. It likes acidic, moist soil, neither of which it gets at my house, but every spring I have buttercup. My neighbors have buttercup. I mean, it's so lovely. It's all over. It looks like, you know, you ought to be able to decorate cakes with it and things like that, but don't do it. All parts are poisonous. It does have high deer resistance. Here's one of our shrubs. The coral bean is also called the Cherokee bean or red cardinal. It is a perennial shrub that gets to 6 feet tall, and we do have it in Park West. You've got these lovely scarlet red flowers that come out before the leaves appear in the spring, and hummingbirds particularly like them for nectar. Grows in the sun and part shade. Do not eat the seeds, they're poisonous. Coreopsis has an interesting nickname. It's called tick seed, and you can probably tell why. The fruit looks like a bug or a tick. The name Coreopsis is a combination of Greek and Latin, which means appearance of a bug. The My sources recommended giving frequent deadheading to keep it blooming. It is drought tolerant, and it is not deer resistant. Yes, sir.
Are the seeds poisonous?
That I don't know. No one mentioned it, so who knows if the seeds are poisonous. The deer pea vetch could also be Louisiana vetch. May I comment that if you are taking photos of wildflowers, and I actually do have leaves in this picture, but many of my photos, I did not get the leaves, I just got the flower. And then when you get back home and you look through your sources to find out what in the world you took a picture of, you discover that you needed more than a flower to determine what the plant is. Well, sometimes you even need more than leaves and a flower. So this could be astragalus, or it could be vicia, and therefore slim pod milk vetch. Nevertheless, it is good deer forage. So if you see it and you're raising deer, you probably want to leave it. It is an annual and it blooms from March through May. Did you know that this is the 2020 herb of the year? It's related to the blackberry. It is a perennial. It has thorns. With the fruit is edible. It grows 1 to 3 feet and blooms in March and April. And swamps, floodplains, bottomland, and along my dry creek bed. Sun, park shade, birds like it, native bees like it. I just leave it along the dry creek bed. It grows all year long, and I think it's a very useful plant. Engelmann's daisy is also called cutleaf daisy. The unusual thing about it is that it is a monotypic genus. This means it contains only one species. It's perennial, grows to 3 feet tall. It is one of the very few yellow flowers that I can identify. And the reason for that is the cut leaves. March through July, it blooms. We find it in open fields, along roadsides. It likes sun, dry soil, and livestock like it. And as near as I could tell, it doesn't hurt them if they eat it. Oops. Sorry, I don't know how to go back. There we go. No, that was right. The full aster, or the aromatic aster, you notice I have several choices. And it could even be a third species, patens, or a fourth species. It's not that because it's not white. Ericoides is white. So out of 3, 4 species, I know one it isn't. Low water use, sun, park shade, and it colonizes by stolons. And you want to keep it thinned, and you cut it half back in June, and when it goes dormant, you cut it back to that basal rosette in the late winter. It blooms from September through November, and the ones at the park should be starting to bloom pretty soon, I hope. It is a value to native bees. The interesting thing is throughout Park West are wild asters, and they have had a few blooms all summer long. The fringed puccoon, the first one I ever saw was so exciting. It's that kind of little fringed, rippled bloom. It's in the borage family, and it blooms from April through June, gets 1 to 3 feet tall, and you find it in open woods in disturbed areas. It is deciduous. The Navajos chewed the root for coughs and colds. Now, the interesting thing about it, besides chewing the root, is that your fertile seed comes from late flowers in the lower leaf axils. The flowers don't open, but they fertilize themselves. And that's where the seed comes from. This one, I'm pretty sure, is the one I saw in that park in New Braunfels as you're driving in 725. What park is that? Anybody? You know the one I mean. No one does. Pardon?
Fisher Park.
Fisher Park, thank you. Frostweed is another one of my favorites, and it's also called Indian tobacco or iceweed. And I think the reason that I like it is because of Forrest Mim's photograph, where when it freezes, the stems split and the ice pours out in beautiful, fantastic shapes. So every winter after the first freeze, I run out to my frostweed and check. And actually, I got some pictures this year, but they were nothing like Forrest Mim's. They were okay, but not exciting. The plant, if you need to recognize it, the stem has soft, fleshy green flanges that run the length of the stem. So it's really easy to identify. It's deciduous, grows to about 6 feet tall. These flower heads are 3 to 6 inches across. We find it in shade, part shade, and one of mine is almost part sun. Butterflies like it, native and honeybees like it. Deer don't care much for it. The indigenous people dried those leaves and used it as tobacco. Isn't that a beautiful flower? The green milkweed vine, or the pearl vine, the first time I ever saw it along the side of the road was I was up at my son's house in Austin, and it was alongside the roadway, and it was so lovely. It is in the milkweed family. It's a perennial. It does drop its leaves, and the vine gets to 12 feet long. Blooms April through June. Ours at the park bloomed on into July. Low water use, grows in part shade, usually on the edge of a wooded area, cold and heat tolerant, and it is a host to the queen and the monarch butterfly. It is deer resistant. I have a baby from seed that I'm trying to decide where I'm going to plant it. It does not, what?
I will let you know that I have a whole bunch of seeds.
Do you?
From a plant that's near our house. I've been watching those seed pods. until they burst open.
Okay, great. More pearl vine seed pods. The goldenrod does not cause hay fever. I will say that right at the beginning. It has a bad rap because ragweed blooms at the same time as the goldenrod. My goldenrod is starting to set buds on it. This perennial plant, and I'm sorry the lousy picture, but when I took the photo, it was the last one in bloom and it was laying down. So that's why you ended up with a bunny rabbit. But when it starts, it will bloom through November. It attracts butterflies and native and honeybees. And why it's so valuable is it and the frostweed are two of our fall bloomers. And, you know, we don't have that many fall bloomers. The white gora, butterfly gora, Lindheimer's bee blossom, we always called gora. It's not called gora anymore. It's now been put in the Inothera genus. I have also seen it called Drummondii. Grows to 1 to 3 feet, and I really think that depends on the water, because I know the one I had in my garden got much bigger than the one out in the lawn. It blooms April through July. It's cold tolerant, and it puts up with a variety of soils. It is doesn't mind high heat. It has moderate deer resistant, and at least one source said it could be invasive. I have never, ever seen an invasive area of gora, but I don't know where they lived. And the interesting tidbit, if you want to smell come springtime, the fragrance has been compared to cat urine. Yes. Hemlock is also called beaver poison. It's in the carrot family. It's poison, all parts. The stem has magenta streaks. It's a biennial plant, and it grows along wet areas. This one I saw out at Starkey East along Walnut Creek. It is a pretty plant, though.
Can that be confused with Queen's lace? Does it look like it somewhere?
The Queen Anne's lace I know has smaller flowers,
Okay.
and they're more circular. Sorry, I want you to see this one first. The Scarlet Pimpernel is also orange, red, or blue. It's a spring, summer annual, and it is a common weed found throughout South Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. This one I found over by the funeral home off of 123 bypass. Trey Huel, right. And before they got so good at mowing along that sidewalk. Now, this, come on. No. There. This one, can you see that? Terrible picture, too much sun. That's the little orange colored flowers, but it's also scarlet pimpernel. The Indian blanket is called fireweed also, and it's an annual, grows to 3 feet tall. It will bloom from May through August, or if we get rain, it would have bloomed longer. Grows in the sun and part shade, and it reseeds readily if you want to plant it. It attracts butterflies and bees. Now, the indigenous people used the root as a tea for stomach upsets. They also chewed the root for skin disorders. The Kiowa considered it a good luck plant. There's got to be a trick to this, but I don't know what it is. That is not blue flag, I feel quite sure. The species that is our wildflower is the Iris virginica, which is a perennial, and it grows in the eastern part of the state with rich, moist soils. The iris is one of our oldest cultivated plants. Back in the 1501 to 1447 BC, Thutmose III brought the iris from Syria to Egypt. And then it kind of came all the way to us eventually. The larkspur, this particular species has 2 subspecies. One of them has 3-parted leaves, and one of them has 5+ parts to the leaves. It's also called the prairie larkspur. And it blooms from March through July, anywhere from white to dark violet or purple. And we find it in pastures, prairies, grassy plains, open woodlands. If you have cattle and you have too many in your pasture, in other words, your land is overgrazed, you want to keep the larkspur out of the pasture. It has been known to cause death in cattle. The letterflower is such a neat little flower, and it does look kind of like made out of leather, doesn't it? And you find it in usually along open thickets and along creeks and streams. It blooms March through October. And it's another one of these that contains poisonous substances, so you probably don't want to eat it or put it on your food. There. This is the scarlet musk flower, or the devil's bouquet. I first saw this flower when I was walking in Starkey West on that road along the golf course, the one that goes down and turns around and comes back. And it was growing on the side of the road, and it was so exciting. It was fairly early in the morning, which is about right because the plant is in the 4 o'clock family. So it opens in the cool of the evening and then it closes the next morning when it gets the hot sun. And it's anywhere from bloom November, it's a red fuchsia or reddish orange. Another spot, Nancy Masterson and I found it in Crescent Bend one year, and just growing out alongside the trail. And it's such a lovely flower. It's another one of the plants that you might want to check for yourself, but it's called the musk flower and devil's bouquet because it has a strong and offensive musky odor. I did not get down on my hands and knees, so I did not smell it. I don't know. Does anyone know how to do this without this?
If you have, you can use your arrow to advance the slide.
Can I? Oh, good, because I'm going to do that. There. Oh, 100% better. Okay. The violet wood sorrel could be Violacea, or it could be Drummondii. But I got down in the garden and I studied those leaves, and they look more like Violacea to me. It's lavender to purple, and it has those pretty little greenish yellow centers. And the leaves are full of oxalic acid crystals, which, if you eat a lot of them, causes convulsions. The Osage ate them. I have no idea why. The Omaha used them as a poultice for swelling. Passion flower, the one we have around here, is fetida. You also have the incarnata, Passiflora incarnata, and the leaves are deeply three-lobed and sometimes have serrated margins. This is a fetida, also called Corona de Cristo, because the fruit is red. The incarnata, the maypop, has orange-yellow fruit, and that's edible. I don't know about the red fruit. I'm really not one on checking things like this out. You also have a yellow passion flower called lutea, and I have not seen that around here. It grows in sandy soil, it's a perennial, and it's a larval host for the Gulf fritillary. It has a liking for alongside the soccer field out at Park West. They have a great big area that all the bushes are covered with passion flower. Phacelia congesta is also called blue curls, spider flower, wild heliotrope. That word phacelia comes from the Greek, and it means bundle, and it refers to the flower cluster, which is coiled. We had 2 years ago and 3 years ago, we had a whole bunch out at Park West. They were just gorgeous. This year, 1 or 2. Now, it could be because they are annual to biannual, so maybe we're on an in-between year. But they do bloom from February through June. The phlox, I know you've all seen the phlox. You can buy them in the nursery, And you figure out which kind it was by whether the flower lobes have a pointed tip. The pilosa is fragrant and is sticky. The word phlox comes from Greek. It means flame. And it grows February through June. And we used to drive down, when I lived in Kingsville, we'd drive down to Sarita because all around the courthouse would be solid phlox with people taking photographs. Chromaria is prairie sandbur, and they call it that because it has little barbless spines. It's also called trailing ratney because on the soil, those stems get to be about 5 feet long. It blooms from April to November and grows throughout Texas, except for far eastern Texas. The prairie verbena is not a prairie verbena anymore. It's a glandularia, one of these that they've changed the name. Those purple flowers change color as they age. It can be anywhere from purple to lavender to rose pink, depending on the age. And it blooms February through July. Now, here's a member of the evening primrose family. It's common throughout Texas, but we don't find it much in the Chihuahuan Desert and the northern panhandle. 4 petals, the yellow centers, darker veins, lots of pollen, and it's taking over the pollinator garden at Park West. So if you want to come out and work, that's what we will put you to work doing, is pulling out primrose. Rain lily, I have had them popping up in the yard after that lovely rain I had. It's also called the evening rain lily, Drummond's rain lily, or Ceboletta. Eason doesn't call it cooperi, he calls it Zephyranthus. Wildflower was still calling it this, so I'm sure either one you can find it in the book. It does have fragrant flowers, and it almost always appears a day or so after the rain. Salvia, this particular one is tropical sage or scarlet sage, and it is in the mint family, blooms from February through December. It is a perennial, it's hairy, and it's a very hardy plant. Butterflies like it, hummingbirds like it. And it was first collected by botanist John Bartram in 1774. He found it in Florida and he sent it to England. And it became a popular garden plant back in England. This one I put in because I like that flower, but I have not seen it around here. I went to ride the train in Livingston, and it was growing in a marsh alongside where we were. It's called lizard's, pardon?
It's an aquatic plant.
It is an aquatic plant, yes. It likes springs, marshes, seeps, and this particular species is the only one in North America. It blooms April through June.
How is that pronounced?
Pardon?
How is it pronounced?
Um,
I'm not talking about that.
just call it lizard's tail.
Clara and I, we talk about the etymology of the scientific word. Could genus name Solaris is from the order of lizard. Lizards are called saurians.
Saurians or lizard. Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay.
So the genus of lizards is saurians.
All right. Tom tells us that the genus means lizards. The sensitive briar mimosa is to me looks like something else, two other species. And you will note I only have the flower. This actually is one of Ron's pictures. And he picked the flower and he got in the car, closed all the doors, and went in underneath the dashboard to take the picture. So that's why you have that lovely picture there. It grows 1 to 3 feet and blooms April through July.
Sensitive briar is if you take your finger and run over the leaves, they will immediately close up.
Right. Tom reminds us that you run your finger over the leaves for sensitive briar and the leaves will close. Your prairie spiderwort, supposedly the leaves and flowers can be eaten. Do not eat the root. The root has saponin, which is poisonous. The Dakota used the plant as a love charm while singing. I don't know if they held it or ate it or what. The Ohio spiderwort, the stems have a gluey sap, and there's also a Texas spiderwort, but this one looked most to me like the prairie spiderwort. Now, for those of you who are having trouble keeping your lawn alive, the straggler daisy or the horseherb or carpet weed is a lawn invader, but it is excellent ground cover in shaded places. If you can't get your grass to grow under a tree, then let this grow. It blooms all year, and the bordered patch butterfly uses it as a larval plant food. Another shrub that has gotten into my slideshow, the Texas mountain laurel or the mescal bean. Obviously, we don't eat the seeds. They have an alkaloid cystine or sophorine, which is related to nicotine, and it's a narcotic and a hallucinogen. It was used by the indigenous people as necklaces and as a hallucinogenic drug. This shrub grows to 30 feet tall and is drought tolerant. It blooms February through March with those lovely purple flowers, which people think smell like grape Kool-Aid. I'm not sure if that's what I thought it smelled like, but I do love it. It's a really nice plant. The Texas paintbrush is an erect hemiparasitic annual. And what that means is the roots of the plant grow until they touch the roots of other plants. Then they penetrate the roots of the host plant and obtain a portion of their nutrient from that host plant.
Are you sure that it's an annual?
Am I sure it's an annual?
Because we've got it coming up in our yard in the same place. And I don't think it's coming up from seed.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Well,
Whatever.
maybe it's a different species or something.
Just curious.
No, I'm not sure. All I know is all three sources said this species was. The Texas persimmon is in the ebony family. It's also called chipotle, and it has that lovely hard wood. It can reach 35 feet tall. It's fragrant flowers in March and April. It does have edible fruit, which gets ripe in July into September, but you probably won't get any off of your tree because someone else will have gotten it. That trunk is very popular. The heartwood is black and the sapwood is a clear yellow. Really beautiful. The peccary really like to eat Texas persimmons. The plant is a larval host for the gray hair-streaked butterfly and for Henry's elfin butterfly. Texas redbud, member of the pea family, is different from the eastern redbud, and I have one of each, and it's really obvious. It's smaller, the leaves are glossier and hairier, they have wavy edges, and it's more often has the red seed pods. It is drought tolerant, deciduous, it's white, pink, purple, sun, bark shade. It is a larval host for the Henry's elfin butterfly. You can take those flowers and fry or pickle them for salads. Native and bumblebees like it. My eastern redbud is about 70 feet tall and it's blah. The Texas redbud, those leaves are just beautiful. Texas vervain grows throughout the state except for the panhandle. This could be Gulf vervain, but I don't think so because it likes coastal and blackland prairies, and where I found this wasn't. February through December, very rarely will you see a white one. This is an important medicinal herb and charm against witches. So in England, actually, the Druids regarded the English vervain as a sacred herb. The Texas thistle, also called the purple thistle or the southern thistle, has numerous disc flowers and no ray flowers. It is a larval food for the painted lady butterfly. The goldfinch eats seeds from the Texas thistle, and they take that fluff off the ripened seeds and use it to line their nests. The plant blooms from April through July. Now, this one I probably should have taken out. And Eason is not calling it a verbena, he's calling it a glandularia. But this one is a perennial, and it's native to South America and was introduced to the US. I took this from a wildflower garden over at Fisher Park, which is why it has the name tag on it. Violets are, I keep saying my favorite thing, don't I? Anyway, the violet is one of my favorite flowers, also the Missouri violet, or it could be the common blue violet, but it blooms along stream banks, swamps, woodlands, and it colonizes with rhizomes. The common blue violet also likes fields, prairies, open woodlands, sandy soil, sun, part shade, shade, self-seeds. The interesting thing about it, it has high deer resistance. And this kind of surprises me because this is one of those plants that we pick the flowers and we crystallize them and use them in cake decorating. So if we eat them, why don't deer eat them? Not that I want deer eating my violets, but the leaves are high in vitamin A and C. Widow's tears, or dayflower, is called that because each only blooms for a day. And this is March through December. It will grow to 2 feet tall in Texas. It has 3 petals. You can only see 2 because the third one is inconspicuous. It does attract birds. And I threw in a wild rose. I have no idea in the world what species it is because there are many, many, many species with many, many varieties. But it is a shrub or perennial, grows 3 to 6 feet, has thorns or prickles. You can almost see them on that one. It's valuable for our bumblebees and our native bees. In fact, the native bees, it provides nesting materials and structure for them. And my last wildflower is the wine cup or the poppy mallow, and it's in the mallow family. It blooms February through July, and it's pollinated mainly by bees. The Lakota had a special name for it, which means smoke treatment medicine. They took the smoke from a dried root and they inhaled it for a head cold. The Osage used that root as a food source. And you have a European marshmallow, which exudes a sticky sap from its roots, which is used commercially in marshmallows. Do we have questions? No questions.
No questions. Thank you for reminding me.
If you are on, this is Mike, by the way, if you are online and you wanted to ask a question, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask that question.
I'm here. I see someone with a question, but I'm not hearing anything.
They missed their chance.
Oh, she's trying again.
Comes Matt, he can tell us.
I think someone has a question, Matt, but I don't know how to bring it up. No, that's muting it.
Question while the other person was trying to get set up. When you mentioned the wild rose, you said there were many varieties and species. Pardon my ignorance, but I mean, are those words interchangeable or do those mean different things, varieties versus species?
Those mean different things. You have genus, then species, then varieties, and under species there were subspecies, and back to what I said at the beginning is that I don't necessarily know which species a plant is in my picture because I was not thinking that when I took the photo of the flower, that I would have to identify it later. Any other questions? I have, who was speaking about?
Nancy had some comments about a couple of the plants that are on here that you were talking about.
Yes. Okay. Will the slideshow be available is one of the questions.
Yes, I'm going to I'm actually going to stop recording on this slideshow. And then it will be available. I've got to figure out how to send it out or if we can link that video to the website, but it'll be available.
Okay, I have one question that someone was asking, who was talking about the pearl vine seeds? May I give her your name? It's Pam. Well, I assumed she knew you. No, Pam Sagabel, no. And okay.
Very good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.